I'd like to begin this meeting of Bethlehem City Council for Tuesday, November 15th. Will everyone please stand for the invocation to be given by the Reverend Bern Weishaupt for Bethany United Church of Christ. Please remain standing for the pledge to the flag, please. Reverend.
I thank you for the privilege and the honor of giving this invocation. I chose as my invocation because we're so close to Thanksgiving, something from the reading for next week for Thanksgiving Day. As you might know, for 40 years the Israelites were wandering around in the desert, practically around the same mountain for 40 years, and during that time God provided all of the food and water that they needed, so they really didn't have to search. It was just given to them. And so when they finally settled upon the promised land, they did what everybody does when they settle upon something new and get together. They had a council meeting. And this is what you have. And so I'm going to give you a reading what Moses addressed his council from the book of Deuteronomy from the Hebrew people. For the Lord your God is bringing you into a good land, a land with brooks, streams, and deep springs gushing out into the valleys and hills, a land with wheat and barley, vines and fig trees, pomegranates, olive oil, and honey, a land where bread will not be scarce, and you will lack nothing, a land where the rocks are iron, and you can dig copper out of the hills. When you have eaten and are satisfied, praise the Lord your God for the good land he has given you. You may say to yourself, my power and the strength of my hands have produced this wealth for me. But remember the Lord your God, for it is he who gives you the ability to produce wealth, and so confirms his covenant, which he swore to your ancestors, as it is so today. Amen.
Amen.
I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Amen. Mike Palos is here.
Please call the roll.
Mrs. Walensky, present. Mr. DiGiacinto.
Present.
Ms. Dolan.
Present.
Mr. Evans.
Present.
Mr. Mauer.
Present.
Mr. Reynolds.
Present.
Mr. Donchez.
Present. Move to item 4, approval of the minutes for November 1, 2011. Comments? Minutes stand approved. We'll move to courtesy of the floor for a public comment on an ordinance or resolution to be voted on this evening by City Council with a 5-minute time limit on agenda item. We do not have anyone that has signed up. We have 2 people for second courtesy. Anyone like to address council? We will move into business. Item 6, old business, members of council. Move to reports, President of Council. The budget hearing schedule, which should be on the website for 2012, is as follows. This Thursday, November 17th, beginning at 7 p.m. in Town Hall, will be the first public hearing on the budget. We will review the Parks and Public Property Department, Golf Course Enterprise Fund, Police Department, 911, and Fire Department. Monday, November 21st, 2011, following a finance meeting at 7 p.m. in Town Hall, we'll have our second budget hearing. City Council will review civic expenses, budgets of council, the mayor, treasurer, and controller, law bureau, Department of Administration, general fund revenue, general fund expenditures, general expenses, and debt service. Wednesday, December 7th, 2011, 7:30 p.m. in Town Hall. We will have a committee of the whole meeting to review the 5-year capital plan, and then we will move into our third budget hearing, Public Works Department, Liquid Fuels Fund, Non-Utility Capital Fund, Community Development Block Grant, and Community and Economic Development Departments. And Monday, December 12th, 7 p.m., our fourth budget hearing, Water and Sewer Resources, Water Fund Revenue and Expenses, Water Capital Budget, Sewer Fund Revenue and Expenses, and Sewer Capital Budget. And Thursday, December 15th, 7 p.m. in Town Hall will be the final budget meeting for City Council on Thursday, December 15th. That's my report, Mr. Mayor.
Just one brief comment, Mr. President. I just wanted to let everybody know that limbs and branches and debris, which has been out in the streets or was out in the streets post the October snowstorm, has for the bulk of it's been picked up. Any additional needs or debris that's out in the street will be picked up on a case-by-case basis. I want to give a tremendous credit to our Public Works Department and our Parks Department, and even Community and Economic Development for their assistance in sort of cleaning up the city post-storm. The temporary yard waste or debris area that was set up outside of or in the parking lot of the driving range was utilized, was very successful and utilized by a lot of residents. So they actually did assist the city crews a great deal in bringing their debris there on their own. We have discontinued the usage of that lot, and so just to let folks know that the compost pile is the compost center is open with its usual hours for folks that want to bring yard waste there during the week. So just want to let you know that we started leaf collection this week, which is our regularly scheduled leaf pickup, the beginning of our leaf cleanup for the season, and we're very much back on track in that regard. So it was sort of a great effort on the part of the city crews to clean up the city, and we're kind of back to normal at this point.
Thank you. We'll move to item 10, new ordinances. 10A, Bill 25, adopting the 2012 general fund budget.
An ordinance of the City of Bethlehem, Counties of Lehigh and Northampton, Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, adopting the general fund budget for 2012. The Council of the City of Bethlehem ordains that the financial program is adopted for 2012 and appropriations made to the various departments, boards, offices, authorities, and commissions as indicated in the ordinance for appropriations in the sum of $66,725,000 in the general fund for council, mayor, controller, treasurer, Bureau of Law, Department of Administration, Community and Economic Development, Parks and Public Property, Public Works, Police, Fire, General and Civic Expenses, Library and Debt Service. Section 3 is the repealer. Bill number 25 is sponsored by J. William Reynolds and Eric Evans.
And since this is a first read, this could be a vote without prejudice. Members desire. Comments? Please call the roll.
Mrs. Belinsky. Aye. Mr. DiGiacinto.
Aye.
Ms. Dolan.
Aye.
Mr. Evans.
Aye.
Mr. Mauer.
Aye.
Mr. Reynolds.
Aye.
Mr. Donchez.
Aye.
6-1.
10B, Bill 26, adopting the 2012 water fund budget.
An ordinance of the City of Bethlehem, Counties of Lehigh and Northampton, Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, adopting the water fund budget for 2012. The Council of the City of Bethlehem ordains that appropriations in the sum of $19,765,000 are made from the water fund for personal services, materials and supplies, purchase of services and equipment. Section 2 is the repealer. Bill number 26 is sponsored by J. William Reynolds and Eric Evans.
Comments? Please call the roll.
Mrs. Belinsky. Aye. Mr. DiGiacinto.
Aye.
Ms. Dolan.
Aye.
Mr. Evans.
Aye.
Mr. Mauer.
Aye.
Mr. Reynolds.
Aye.
Mr. Donchez.
Aye.
6-1.
10C, Bill 27, adopting the 2012 sewer fund budget.
An ordinance of the City of Bethlehem, Counties of Lehigh and Northampton, Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, adopting the sewer fund budget for 2012. The Council of the City of Bethlehem ordains that appropriations in the sum of $13,025,000 are made from the sewer fund for personal services, materials and supplies, purchase of services and equipment. Section 2 is the repealer. Bill number 27 is sponsored by J. William Reynolds and Eric Evans.
Comments? Please call the roll.
Mrs. Belinsky. Aye. Mr. DiGiacinto.
Aye.
Ms. Dolan.
Aye.
Mr. Evans.
Aye.
Mr. Mauer.
Aye.
Mr. Reynolds.
Aye.
Mr. Donchez.
Aye.
6-1.
10D, Bill 28, adopting the 2012 golf course enterprise fund budget.
An ordinance of the City of Bethlehem, Counties of Lehigh and Northampton, Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, adopting the Golf Course Enterprise Fund budget for 2012. The Council of the City of Bethlehem ordains that appropriations in the sum of $1,572,000 are made from the Golf Course Enterprise Fund for personal services, materials and supplies, purchase of services and equipment. Section 2 is the repealer. Bill number 28 is sponsored by J. William Reynolds and Eric Evans.
Comments? Please call the roll.
Mrs. Belinsky. Aye. Mr. DiGiacinto. Ms. Dolan.
Aye.
Mr. Evans.
Aye.
Mr. Mauer.
Aye.
Mr. Reynolds.
Aye.
Mr. Donches.
Aye.
6-1.
10E, Bill 29, adopting 2012 liquid fuels fund budget.
An ordinance of the City of Bethlehem, Counties of Lehigh and Northampton, Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, adopting the Liquid Fuels Fund budget for 2012. The Council of the City of Bethlehem ordains that the following Liquid Fuels Fund budget is adopted for 2012 with appropriations in the sum of $1,464,820 for maintenance, construction, and equipment. Section 3, the revenues are carryover 2010 allocation estimated in 2010 turn back. Section 3 is a repeal of Bill number 29 is sponsored by J. William Reynolds and Eric Evans.
Comments? Please call the roll.
Mrs. Belinsky. Aye. Mr. DiGiacinto. Ms. Dolan.
Aye.
Mr. Evans.
Aye.
Mr. Mauer.
Aye.
Mr. Reynolds.
Aye.
Mr. Donches.
Aye.
6-1.
10F, Bill 30, adopting the 2012 capital budget for non-utilities.
An ordinance of the City of Bethlehem, Counties of Lehigh and Northampton, Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, adopting the 2012 capital budget for non-utilities. The Council of the City of Bethlehem ordains that the following capital budget for non-utilities is adopted for 2012 with appropriations in the sum of $8,605,047 for projects in public safety, parks and public property, public works, and other non-utility projects. Section 3, the revenues are from 2011 bond, 2008 note, 2007 bond, federal and Pennsylvania grants, cash, and miscellaneous. Section 3 is a repealer. Bill number 30 is sponsored by Eric Evans and J. William Reynolds.
Comments? Please call the roll.
Mrs. Belinsky. Aye. Mr. DiGiacinto.
Nay.
Ms. Dolan.
Aye.
Mr. Evans.
Aye.
Mr. Mauer.
Aye.
Mr. Reynolds.
Aye.
Mr. Donches.
Aye.
6-1.
10G, Bill 31, adopting the 2012 capital budget for water utilities.
An ordinance of the City of Bethlehem, Counties of Lehigh and Northampton, Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, adopting the 2012 capital budget for water utilities. The Council of the City of Bethlehem ordains that the following capital budget for water utilities is adopted for 2012 with appropriations in the sum of $3,466,038 for the projects listed in the bill. Section 3, the revenues line of credit, H2O Pennsylvania grant for the valves, and also for the 12 million gallon Southwest Reservoir covering minor bond redemption and improvement. Section 4 is a repealer. Bill number 31 is sponsored by Eric Evans and J. William Reynolds.
Comments? Please call the roll.
Mrs. Belinsky. Aye. Mr. DiGiacinto. Ms. Dolan.
Aye.
Mr. Evans.
Aye.
Mr. Mauer.
Aye.
Mr. Reynolds.
Aye.
Mr. Donches.
Aye.
6-1.
10H, Bill 32, adopting the 2012 capital budget for sewer utilities.
An ordinance of the City of Bethlehem, Counties of Lehigh and Northampton, Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, adopting the 2012 capital budget for sewer utilities. The Council of the City of Bethlehem ordains that the following capital budget for sewer utilities is adopted for 2012 with appropriations in the sum of $15,084,788 for the projects as listed in the bill. The revenue sources, Penvest Loan Bank Loan Line of Credit, Capital Appropriations. Section 4 is a repeal of Bill number 32 is sponsored by Eric Evans and J. William Reynolds.
Comments? Please call the roll.
Mrs. Belinsky. Aye. Mr. DiGiacinto.
Nay.
Ms. Dolan.
Aye.
Mr. Evans.
Aye.
Mr. Mauer.
Aye.
Mr. Reynolds.
Aye.
Mr. Donches.
Aye.
6-1.
10I, Bill 33, adopting the 2012 community development budget.
An ordinance of the City of Bethlehem, Counties of Lehigh and Northampton, Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, adopting the community development budget for 2012. The Council of the City of Bethlehem ordains that appropriations in the sum of $6,091,250 are made for the Community Development Act projects from 2003 to 2012, the Home Investment Partnership grants, and the Homelessness Prevention and Rapid Rehousing Grant. The revenues, community development grants, home investment partnership grants, and homelessness prevention and rapid rehousing grant. Section 3 is repealed. Bill number 33 is sponsored by Eric Evans and J. William Reynolds.
Comments? Please call the roll.
Mrs. Belinsky. Aye. Mr. DiGiacinto.
Nay.
Ms. Dolan.
Aye.
Mr. Evans?
Aye.
Mr. Mauer?
Aye.
Mr. Reynolds?
Aye.
Mr. Donches?
Aye.
6-1.
10J, Bill 34, adopting the 2012 911 fund budget.
An ordinance of the City of Bethlehem, Counties of Lehigh and Northampton, Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, adopting the 911 fund budget for 2012. The Council of the City of Bethlehem ordains that appropriations in the sum of $3,110,000 are made from the 911 fund for personal services, materials and supplies, purchase of services and equipment. Section 2 is a repeal of Bill number 34, sponsored by Eric Evans and Gordon Mallett.
Comments? Please call the roll.
Mrs. Polinsky? Aye. Mr. DeGiacinto?
Nay.
Ms. Dolan?
Aye.
Mr. Evans?
Aye.
Mr. Mauer?
Aye.
Mr. Reynolds?
Aye.
Mr. Donches?
Aye.
6-1.
10K, Bill 35, fixing the 2012 tax rate for all city purposes.
An ordinance of the City of Bethlehem, Counties of Lehigh and Northampton, Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, fixing the tax rate for all city purposes for the year 2012. The Council of the City of Bethlehem ordains that a tax be paid the same as levied on all persons in real property within the city, subject to taxation for city purposes for the fiscal year as follows. For general city purposes, 6.73 mils. Towards completion of the 911 console upgrade, 0.75 mils. The sum of 0.75 mils shall be placed in a separate dedicated account titled Non-Utility Capital Projects and shall not be commingled with any other monies whatsoever. All disbursements from this account shall be subject to City Council approval prior to disbursement to assure that these funds are utilized towards completion of the 911 console upgrade and non-utility capital projects approved by City Council. For recreation purposes, the sum of 0.95 mils. For debt purposes, the sum of 4.61 mils. Landfill debt purposes, the sum of 0.40 mils. For HERCO settlement debt purposes, the sum of 0.50 mils. For library purposes, the sum of 0.91 mils. Total for all purposes, 14.85 mils. Section 2 is a repeal, or Section 3. This ordinance will take effect January 1st, 2012. Bill number 35 is sponsored by Eric Evans and Gordon Mauer.
Comments? Please call the roll.
Mrs. Polinsky? Aye. Mr. DeGiacinto? Ms. Dolan?
Aye.
Mr. Evans?
Aye.
Mr. Mauer?
Aye.
Mr. Reynolds?
Aye.
Mr. Donches?
Aye.
6-1.
We'll move to resolutions. 11A, designating Michael Tchaikovsky, disaster relief funding, Hurricane Irene.
Be it resolved by the Council of the City of Bethlehem that Michael Stankovsky, Fire Assistant Chief, is authorized to execute for and on behalf of the city, as established under the laws of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, all the required forms and documents for the purpose of obtaining financial assistance under the Robert T. Stafford Disaster Relief and Emergency Assistance Act. Resolution 11A is sponsored by Jean Belinsky and David DeGiacinto.
Comments? Please call the roll.
Mrs. Belinsky? Aye. Mr. DeGiacinto?
Aye.
Ms. Dolan?
Aye.
Mr. Evans?
Aye.
Mr. Mauer?
Aye.
Mr. Reynolds?
Aye.
Mr. Donches?
Aye.
7-0 passes.
11B, designated Michael Tchaikovsky, disaster relief funding for Tropical Storm Lee.
Be it resolved by the Council of the City of Bethlehem that Michael Stankovsky, Fire Assistant Chief, is authorized to execute for and behalf of the city, as established under the laws of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, all the required forms and documents for the purpose of obtaining financial assistance under the Robert T. Stafford Disaster Relief and Emergency Assistance Act. Resolution 11B is sponsored by Jean Belinsky and David DeGiacinto.
Comments? Please call the roll.
Mrs. Belinsky? Aye. Mr. DeGiacinto?
Aye.
Ms. Dolan?
Aye.
Mr. Evans?
Aye.
Mr. Mauer?
Aye.
Mr. Reynolds?
Aye.
Mr. Donches?
Aye.
7-0 passes.
11C, termination of police officer Jeffrey Rogers. Mr. Spadoni, the clerk will only call 4 names, correct? That's correct. Comments? Please call the roll.
And the resolution is, whereas Jeffrey Rogers is a police officer of the City of Bethlehem, and whereas Bethlehem City Council was advised via written correspondence of John F. Burke Jr., Esquire City Solicitor, dated August 3rd, 2011, as to the misconduct of Officer Rogers recommending termination. Whereas City Solicitor Spurk via written communication dated October 11, 2011 advised as to the specific misconduct of Officer Jeffrey Rogers warranting termination, whereas 53 of the Pennsylvania Consolidated Statutes, Section 39408, states that all employees subject to civil service shall be subject to suspension by the Director of the Department for misconduct or violation of any law of this Commonwealth, any ordinance of the city or regulation of the Department, pending action by the City Council upon the charges made against any of such employees. On the hearing before City Council, where they may be represented by counsel, they may be fined or suspended for a period not exceeding 30 days with or without pay, or they may be discharged by City Council if found guilty of the charges made against them. Whereas pursuant to public notice, Bethlehem City Council held a public hearing on Monday, October 17, 2011 at 7:30 p.m., whereas Officer Rogers, represented by Donald Russo, Esquire, advised that Officer Jeffrey Rogers and Counsel Donald Russo, Esquire, would not appear at the scheduled October 17th public hearing. Whereas upon consideration of the testimony, exhibits, and arguments submitted to Bethlehem City Council at its public hearing of October 17th, be it resolved by Bethlehem City Council as follows, and the findings of fact and the conclusions of law are listed in the resolution. The record as presented to Bethlehem City Council contains overwhelming evidence that Officer Rogers committed numerous violations of police department directives. Officer Rogers' negligent discharge of his firearm within City Hall violated police department directives, was in violation of his firearms training, caused a number of employees and the public to be placed at serious risk, both as a result of the discharge and the search conducted, lied to his police superiors as to his involvement, withheld information which impeded the investigation, and Officer Rogers attempted to cover up his actions by hiding the bullet casing, cleaning his firearm, and reloading his firearm. Bethlehem City Council finds Officer Jeffrey Rogers guilty of the charges as filed and has determined that the recommended punishment of termination is appropriate effective August 3rd, 2011, expressly pursuant to 53 of the Pennsylvania Consolidated Statutes, Section 39408. Conclusion: Officer Jeffrey Rogers is found guilty of the charges as lodged, and the punishment of termination is imposed by Bethlehem City Council pursuant to 53 of the Pennsylvania Consolidated Statutes, Section 39408, effective August 3rd, 2011.
Comments? Please call the roll.
Mr. DiGiacinto.
Aye.
Mr. Evans.
Aye.
Mr. Reynolds.
Aye.
Mr. Donches.
Aye.
4-0 passes.
11D, certificate of appropriateness for 559 Main Street.
A certificate of appropriateness under the provisions of the Act of the Pennsylvania Legislature and Bethlehem Ordinance, whereas it is proposed to install a new awning with logo and business name above the storefront and vinyl lettering on the windows and doors at 559 Main Street. Now therefore be it resolved by the Council of the City of Bethlehem that a certificate of appropriateness is granted for the proposal sponsored by Gene Belinsky and David DiGiacinto.
Comments? Please call the roll.
Mrs. Belinsky. Aye. Mr. DiGiacinto.
Aye.
Ms. Dolan.
Aye.
Mr. Evans.
Aye.
Mr. Mauer. Mr. Reynolds.
Aye.
Mr. Donches.
Aye.
7-0 passes.
We'll move to new business. 12A, rescheduling our second meeting in December to December 21st. Chair will accept the motion from Ms. Dolan, second by Mr. Mauer, to reschedule City Council meeting to Wednesday, December 21st at 7 p.m. at Town Hall, since Hanukkah starts at sundown on Tuesday, December 20th.
Mrs. Belinsky. Aye. Mr. DiGiacinto.
Aye.
Ms. Dolan.
Aye, and thank you.
Mr. Evans.
Aye.
Mr. Mauer. Mr. Reynolds.
Aye.
Mr. Donches.
Aye.
7-0 passes.
We'll move it to 12B, setting the date for the adoption of the 2012 budget. Chair will accept the motion from Mr. Evans, second by Mr. Reynolds, to set the date for the adoption of the 2012 budget on Wednesday, December 21st at 7 p.m. in Town Hall.
Mrs. Belinsky. Aye. Mr. DiGiacinto.
Aye.
Ms. Dolan.
Aye.
Mr. Evans.
Aye.
Mr. Mauer. Mr. Reynolds.
Aye.
Mr. Donches.
Aye.
7-0 passes.
Committee announcements, Mr. Reynolds?
Yes, there will be a Finance Committee meeting on Monday, November 21st, 2011 at 7 p.m. in Town Hall. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Dolan?
There will be a special council committee meeting on Tuesday, November 22nd, 2011 at 6 p.m. in the Mayor's Conference Room on the following subject: Rules of Council, finalized revisions, nominations and elections, procedures, and council solicitor, the role of the council solicitor. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other new business, members of council? If not, we'll move and encourage to the floor on any issue with a 5-minute time limit. Rich, can you tell me? And your name and address, Rich.
Hi, I'm Rick Cantalmi from 1481 Saucon Meadow Court, Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. I hope there wasn't enough What I made here was a package.
We'll start the clock in a minute.
I don't have anything with this.
Thank you.
Basically, I'm glad to see this clock. Thank you. Mayor Callahan, mayors, and members of City Council, from me, Richard Cantal, President of Cantal Fiber Store Incorporated, requesting that the Mayor and City Council approve a reversal of the traffic pattern on Fillmore Street, Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. Requesting reversal of the current traffic pattern due to the following issues: the change of Fillmore Street back to two-way between East 4th and Evans Street. This will help us maintain our current level of customer service, profitability, and ease of doing business. Customers driving west on 4th Street or parking in front of my hardware store can at this point not take a right turn in Fillmore Store to go behind our hardware store and pick up their lawn mowers, snow blowers, or anything that they have for 90 years. The current traffic change has resulted in numerous complaints. It has posed an inconvenience for daily deliveries, our tractor trailers that bring products for us to sell. And then you can see as we continue on, there's pictures of some of the problems we have with the tractor trailers, some of the problems we have with the police been there twice, and we have 180 signed names on a petition to our customers. MapQuest page 1 is the post or pre-change. That was the old traffic pattern for Southside Bethlehem, page 1. Page 2, up until and during Music Fest, Fillmore Street was one way up until the Greenway, or actually Evans Street, and then Fillmore Street was both ways down to Evans, you could turn right. I guess there was a few complaints, I don't know how many. Afterwards, they changed it and made it one way, Fillmore Street, all the way up to 4th Street. We can no longer turn and get behind our store, we can't get our trucks. I noticed also that Polk Street had been changed down at between 3rd and Mechanic Street to facilitate the Polk Street Commons building and their parking lot there. I asked that City Council consider this. This is, like I said, our lifeblood. We've been doing this 90 years. And it's worked very well for the first few weeks when they changed it. Cars drove down the street, we turned right, and we were able to go, and then there was a stop sign, as many streets have, saying one way from here on. With no reason they changed it. Also, many of the signs there right now, we're at 6:30 in the morning. I had to go knock on doors and get people, wake them up, have them move their cars with the tractor trailers, make the turn and make their way into. I don't know if this is something that voted on in City Council, or I did speak to the director of traffic, the young lady that was hired, and I spoke to my lawyer and asked that I would get this petition available. So I ask that you consider this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Salter?
You these are your glasses? Good evening. My name is David Salter, 1731 Cyrusville Road, Bethlehem. I'm the president of Bethlehem Firefighters International Association of Firefighters Local 735. Once again, I'm here to speak out against the mayor's recent announcement that he's closing the Dewberry Firehouse. Once again, I believe the mayor is making an unintelligent decision based upon fallacies that he has come up with
while strong-arming the department heads into supporting this ridiculous idea by dangling their pensions and careers in front of them. He's also gained the support of some of City Council who are not educated on this matter, nor understand the concept of fire, and feel that because they do not live in the poor section of the city and they have the thingies you put on your ceiling with batteries in them, that they will not be affected by these closings. I'm here to tell you you're wrong. Everyone would be affected by this horrible decision. Fire calls are not down. In fact, they are up and they'll continue to rise. Currently, the Bethlehem firefighters have responded to more than 4,000 calls for help, surpassing last year's call volume by 740 and 2005 by 1,500. The year isn't over. In fact, the department's averaging 13 calls per day, responded to over 500 emergencies last month. The Dewberry fire closing will result in increased response times, jeopardize the safety of the citizens and firefighters of this great city. The city functions because of basic city services like police, fire, EMS, and public works. As the mayor continues to make cuts in these areas and decrease city services, our quality of life will decrease. Crime will rise, buildings will burn, people will get hurt. This is the path that we want for our future as well as the future of our children. I urge everyone that it is time to stand up, say enough is enough. Let's start by keeping our fire station open and build the building that our taxes were raised to build. If this building is not built, I think that we should receive a tax refund. And I also urge council to eliminate the tax increase that the mayor was against in the first place. Why should we as residents be lied to again and led to believe that this mayor is going to do what's best for the city when he's closing fire stations, cutting police positions, all while he and other department heads, according to this year's budget, are taking 5 to 10% pay increases?
Thank you. Anyone else like to dispel us?
My name is Leisha Polis. I live in the neighborhood of the proposed fire station closing.
Could we have you address?
I'm sorry, 2530 Madison Avenue.
Thank you.
I'm here to speak because I also am upset about the actions of the mayor. I believe the mayor has not communicated effectively with the people of Bethlehem, and it almost appears that he's not willing to listen to what people have to say. I've already indicated that I started an online petition because the mayor refused to return my 4 phone calls. And I believe that the only reason the mayor is considering closing our neighborhood fire station is due to his mismanagement of funds. I come to City Council tonight to take a stand. I think many people have forgotten that a democracy is a government for the people. We gave City Council the right to rule. They work for us, as does the mayor, and they need to protect our rights. The government and mayor so far have failed to do so. I have heard from many members of City Council and other sources that it's a done deal. These are quotes. It's not my first choice, but I'd vote this way. And I'm very, very upset that it seems like City Council is unwilling to take a stand. As Voltaire, the once famous French philosopher, said, with great power comes great responsibility. And no, it wasn't Peter Parker who said that. City Council has the power of the people. And I'm asking you then to do the responsibility thing and do what is right. Sometimes doing what is right is not easy. But this is the time for the City Council to stand up and speak up against the mayor. You know, the mayor, we know how the mayor will be judged based on his actions for this city. I am asking City Council to decide how you would be judged and what kind of person are you? Are you going to roll over and just accept the mayor's budget? The mayor would not be considering closing our fire station and putting the lives of my children at risk and all the other residents of our neighborhood if the money had not been spent inappropriately. Building an EMS station does not require closing our fire station. And I think it's time for City Council to stand up strong and realize, again, that they have forgotten they work for the city. They work for us. And elections have shown that there are some people willing to stand up for the mayor. And I'm asking you to do what is right and to use your power to keep our fire station open. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Grubb?
Dana Grubb, 2420 Henderson Place. When I was 11 years old, we had a fire in our home. Thankfully, my father, who was an early riser, discovered the developing fire in our basement, called the fire department, and alerted my mother, me, and my 2 sisters to evacuate our small Northeast Bethlehem row home. It was the only time in my life that I sensed any panic in the tone of my father's voice. I happened to just be arising and can still smell the thick, black, acrid smoke that spewed from the heating duct in my bedroom as I sat on the side of my bed. Unless you are a firefighter or have personally survived something like this, you have no idea what that kind of smoke is like. And believe me, it's nothing like what's in the burn house that the public gets to get some education experience from. Smoke filled our home immediately. It stung my eyes and lungs and blinded me. And I left the house as immediately as I could. My father's shouts woke my sisters and mother, who eventually worked their way out of the house. And my 7-year-old sister was carried out by a firefighter. They had responded from the Lincoln Fire Station on Easton Avenue, not quite a mile away, that quickly. I shudder to think what could have happened had that fire started an hour earlier with all 5 of us asleep. And it was the extremely fast response by that engine initially that not only saved our home, but possibly the other 3 in our row. Response times are critical. Bethlehem structures are for the most part older. Removing the engine at Company 7 on Dewberry Avenue will affect response times. It will affect the extent of property damage during a fire and will potentially jeopardize lives. Mr. Mayor, you're blowing it on this call and jeopardizing life and property. And with all due respect to the fire commissioner, you're making a call for a community in which you do not even live. Bethlehem residents and property owners deserve much better than the adequate coverage the mayor cites will exist if the station is closed. Every one of us deserve the optimum level of coverage that we've received for many years. Dewberry isn't even my primary coverage area. My home is covered by the Easton Avenue station first, but what if that one is already occupied at, say, an accident scene on Stefco Boulevard? Knowing that an engine will respond from a very strategically located facility on Dewberry Avenue gives me comfort and probably helps to keep my renter insurance premium lower. Suppose the reconfigured backup, which now has an engine coming from Catasauqua Road, gets blocked at the Ilex Mill Road rail crossing. As my home or that of a friend or a neighbor burns to the ground, or even worse, a life is lost, what will your response be then? Remember, every second counts. And let's not forget that why we've gotten to this point. We're here courtesy of this administration's incompetent management of the city's finances, and yes, sorry to say, some on council's blind cooperation with that. This is simply a money grab being perpetuated due to this mismanagement. It has nothing to do with providing comprehensive public safety. When will council begin to make a stand and act totally on behalf of this city's residents and taxpayers? When will this mayor wake up and realize that public safety is the primary responsibility he and all elected officials have to Bethlehem residents? Not the CI program, not employees commuting back and forth to work in city vehicles, not skate plazas, not ice skating rinks, not golf courses. Public safety. We expect substance, not smoke and mirrors, and the pun is intended. And we deserve to have an engine strategically located at Dewberry Avenue so that we receive better than adequate response times. Why not rearrange your firefighting resources to ensure it? The cost of the facility will not go away if you locate EMS in it. I trust the firefighters in Bethlehem will honor the oath that they took upon their swearing-in ceremony. What I don't trust is that all of the elected officials will honor the oaths that they've taken. Hopefully elected officials most impacted by this move will never suffer its consequences. But if you do, you will have reaped what you've sown.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Mr. Shire?
Somebody left their glasses here. No Shire, 1890 Eaton Avenue. I'd like to add that in the responses to the questionnaire from the Bethlehem Citizens Association to all 6 city council candidates, one of them didn't answer that question, but the other 5 all said no to the closing of the Dewberry station. There's another matter, unfortunately, which is timely. I received notice in the mail today of yet another hearing at the Zoning Hearing Board next Tuesday, courtesy of Mr. Attia. This goes back to the property, the 5 acres on Center Street, which he bought from the cemetery. He's proposing apartments again, this time not quite as many. I don't know if this means he dropped his court suit or not, but The last time, as you may recall, or as I recall, the vote was 2-1 against him, which means if one member of the zoning hearing board thinks, well, it's not as bad, quite as bad as before, I'm going to switch. And then we'll have 96 apartments there in an institutional zone. He's asking for a use variance. Shades of Stratford Park, if you remember that. And eventually the apartments will be built and the administration will come to the council and ask for that 5 acres to be rezoned to reflect what's there, as they're doing now for Stratford Park and Easton Avenue. And so change the zoning to reflect what's there. That's backwards. You change the zoning first. And that's the purview of this council, which, as I've said before, is the most powerful body in this city. It's your job to change zoning, not the zoning hearing board. Now, you are getting a little more aggressive, and I appreciate that. And I would like to ask you that you give Mr. Spadoni another task and ask him to go to the zoning hearing board next Tuesday and to say, quite simply, this use variance amounts to a rezoning. And it may be spot zoning. I don't know. I don't know if 5 acres is small enough to qualify for spot zoning or not, but it's not a large tract, especially when you look around the city. And ask Mr. Spadoni to tell the zoning hearing board, this is not your job to rezone the city. It's our job, upon the advice of the Planning Commission. Tell Mr. Attia, if he wants that property rezoned, to go to the Planning Commission first, and then to the City Council. It's up to us, the council, to decide rezoning. I guess that's it. I think you got the message. Thank you. Oh, now you may feel that you have to do the big song and dance that you always do on resolutions and have them prepared properly and so on. There's not time for that. You got to do something tonight. And it can be done. One of you has to move to go back to new business on the agenda. Somebody has to second, you have to vote.